My first guest joins me in studio, Mr. Frederick Shear. He is the CEO of Cereplast Incorporated. CERP is their stock symbol. Frederick, good to see you again.
All right, thank you, Don. Thank you for having me today.
Now, it's been about 6 or 7 weeks since we last had you on the program. Why don't you tell our audience again what the company does?
Sure. Cereplast is a manufacturer of bioplastic resin. And as the name is suggesting, bioplastic resin means plastic resin, but instead of being made of oil, it's a resin which is made from bio-based material, basically agricultural feedstock. And it's resin that are good for the environment because we have a lower carbon footprint. And then on top of it, product made from our resin will biodegrade, basically go back to nature in a short period of time, less than 6 months in a compost site, without creating any kind of pollution, any kind of carbon dioxide, and any kind of chemical residue. So good for the environment.
Well, you're absolutely right, because I remember reading, well, you can't pick up a newspaper these days without reading it about yet another municipality that's saying we're going to ban plastic bags, the grocery store plastic bags, the department store plastic bags. If they were using plastic bags using your technology, that would no longer be a problem, correct?
You are absolutely right. And the reality is plastic is good by itself, but plastic, when it becomes a plethora like we have right now, becomes a major hazard for the health, for the earth, for the planet, and therefore we need to find solutions. And there are solutions, and Cereplast is definitely offering a solution. It's the reason why I think that the timing for Cereplast is very good now. I think that things are going to change. And as a matter of fact, it's a little bit part of the recent development that we had in the past 6 weeks that I'd be happy to explain.
Well, you just took my next question from me, so I'm going to give you the floor. What's new since we last spoke?
Well, I think that what's new since we last spoke are two types of development that are quite significant for Cereplast. The first one is the European community has been taking really a very strong approach toward banning completely traditional polyethylene bags, traditional plastic bags. And basically, we were working, and we are working in Italy, where we have been working with the authority, trying to get sanctions applied to ban the use of traditional plastics. But the European community stepped in about 3 months ago and said, well, wait a minute, we want to understand this whole thing better. On September 13, the head of the European Community Environmental Commission came out and said that it is now their intention to pass a global, for the entire European Union, a regulation by which they will ban polyethylene bags and will basically expand that Italian legislation to the entire European community and entire continental Europe. We are waiting on the final papers and so on, but it's basically the direction it's taking. For us, this is a huge development because we're looking at a market which is basically being expanded outside of Italy that represent probably about $4 billion. And as a reminder, we are one of the 4 companies able to provide product, in fact, to serve that market. So even if we're not great, but we take 10% of that market, I'm telling you, our shareholders are going to be very, very happy. And frankly, it is what we are after. So clearly, we have been a little bit frustrated by, working with Italians. It's always an adventure because everything is not happening the way they're saying it will happen, nor on the terms. However, what we see now is really a way out with a market which is quite significant. So this, for us, is probably the biggest developments that we have in the past 6 weeks.
Well, now let me ask you a question. So let's say that this ban is instituted, as you mentioned. Your phones are going to start ringing to the point where they melt in your offices. I mean, do you have the ability to ramp up and meet the demand that would come your way?
It's a very good question. As a matter of fact, yes, we do. We have the capability right now. It's in Seymour, Indiana. We have the capability of producing basically about 40,000 tons of material, which, on a full-time basis will translate into about $130 million in revenue for the company. Clearly, it's nothing compared to 4 billion, but the 4 billion not going to happen overnight. And frankly, if we have to double or triple the capacity, we will when the market is there. So clearly, it is something which we are prepared to do. The first thing that we want to do is really go back into very large production, 24/7, and we believe that we probably weeks, maybe months away of basically getting back to that. And I think that for us, it's very exciting.
Well, when your production is maximized, obviously it becomes much easier to make the decision, well, we need to ramp up and increase our capacity and that type of thing. So that's kind of what the plan is. You're going to get yourself to a point where you have to grow because it's necessary for the demand coming in, right?
Absolutely. And then it becomes very easy, in fact, to finance this. It's equipment leasing. It's very easy, in fact, for us to do. We have the space. We have the plans, to be honest with you, in fact, to double, in fact, the capacity if it's needed. But, I'm sure that our shareholders will be delighted when they start to see very substantial revenue, in fact, coming in. And then we had a second big news, which we have been working for several months already. We had opened an office in Yadavabad, India, in southern part of India, and we have been working with about 40 companies to introduce our resin into that market. So it's a long time because, it's a big, first of all, it's very far. Number two, it's a very large market. And we present, people do not realize that, well, you have 1.4 billion Indians.
Right.
And India is the third largest market for plastic resin in the world. So it's a very significant market. The good news is, out of those 40 companies that we have been working with, we have signed now 2 contracts representing about $2 million in revenue within the next few months. For us, it's very important. Not that the number is huge, even though, frankly, $2 million, it's quite significant, but because it's just telling us that we were right to go into India, we were right that the Indian market is starting, in fact, to blossom, and we believe that it's just the tip of the iceberg. So if you combine, on one hand, the Italians expanding into Europe and the Indians coming into that market, I really believe that we are positioning the company for having a brilliant 2014 year.
The company is Cereplast Incorporated, CERP. Frederick, amazing progress. Thanks so much for the update.
All right. Thank you, Don. Good to see you.
You too.